Hey, Wide Awake family. If you're not part of the family yet and love creepy stories, then hit that subscribe button and join us. Tap the bell icon so you'll never miss a story. It really helps out the channel. If you've already done all that, then smash that like button to lock it in, and please tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I would love to interact with you legends. Now to the story.
I matched with this guy named Kai on an app, and honestly, he seemed like the type everyone hypes up. His profile said he was 32, an entrepreneur, had his own little startup thing going, and the pictures showed him dressed sharp in button-down shirts with a watch that looked like it cost more than my car. He had that clean-cut but slightly scruffy look that made him seem like he didn't even try and still looked good. The way he messaged me wasn't over the top, just kind of casual, which I liked. He'd ask me about my day, talk about his late nights at the office, and send me random photos of his dog sitting in the passenger seat of his car. Honestly, he seemed grounded, not like the usual guys who are all over the place. After a week of messaging, he suggested grabbing food. He said he was sick of delivery and wanted to actually sit down somewhere. I figured sure, why not, so we picked a restaurant not too far from me, kind of a family-friendly spot, nothing crazy. He said he'd meet me there because he had errands to run first. Everything was sounding fine, so I didn't really question it. When I got there, I sat down and kept scrolling through my phone, waiting for him to walk in. About 10 minutes later, his kid came in. At first, I barely paid attention because I thought he was just somebody's younger brother tagging along to eat with family. But then he looked around and waved at me. I thought maybe he was just being polite, so I didn't wave back. Next thing I know, he walks right up to my table and says my name. That's when it hit me. The kid standing there was supposed to be Kai. He looked nothing like the guy in the pictures. Same sort of face shape, maybe, but way younger. He wasn't in his 30s, not even close. He looked like he hadn't even hit 20 yet. He had a hoodie, backpack still slung over one shoulder, and acne on his chin that hadn't fully cleared up. I just stared at him, trying to process because my brain was doing backflips. I asked him how old he was, and he laughed like it was no big deal and said 17. 17, not even legal to vote yet. Before I could even wrap my head around it, this woman stormed in from the entrance. I noticed her right away because she was moving fast, like she was on a mission. She came right out to our table, looked at him, and said his full name in that angry parent voice everyone recognizes. Turns out she was his mom. She started going off on him right there in the middle of the restaurant, telling him she told him to stop using his brother's photos, that he was grounded, that she was sick of him sneaking around on dating apps pretending to be his older brother. Everyone in the restaurant was staring. People at the tables near us slowed down eating and kind of leaned in to hear what was going on. It was the most awkward out-of-body moment I've had in years. She looked at me at one point and just said sorry, then grabbed him by the arm and pulled him toward the door. He tried to protest, saying something about how it wasn't a big deal, and she snapped back about how she should have taken his phone away last month when she caught him the first time. Apparently, this wasn't even his first round of doing this. He had been catfishing women for months using his older brother's pictures, who actually was in his 30s and worked some job in another city. That's why the photos looked so convincing. They weren't stolen off random Google searches, they were family photos. She kept saying how his brother was going to kill them when he found out. The whole restaurant watched them leave. He looked embarrassed, but also like he didn't fully get how bad it was, like he still thought it was just a little prank. His mom practically dragged him out the door. When they left, everyone slowly went back to eating, but I was sitting there still stunned. I hadn't even ordered food yet. The waiter came over like, "Are you ready?" And I honestly just said no thanks and left. I couldn't stay there after that. My appetite was gone. Later that night, I kept thinking about it. The weirdest part wasn't even him being younger, it was how normal he acted about it. Like, he didn't try to explain or apologize, just stood there like this was fine. And the fact that his mom had to come in like that, it made it feel even crazier, like I had walked into some sitcom moment. I felt bad for her, honestly, because you could tell she'd been dealing with his nonsense for a while and was just exhausted. Imagine having to storm into a restaurant to drag your kid away from strangers he's tricked online. That's a level of parenting I never wanted to deal with. What stuck with me most was that if she hadn't shown up, I would know how long he would have kept lying. He might have tried to convince me he was older, or maybe just played it off as a joke. Either way, I dodged a mess that night. I didn't even want to think about what would have happened if I had gone along with it. When I read back through the messages later, I started noticing little things that didn't add up. like him always saying he was busy with work, but never being specific, or how he'd avoid video calls saying he was tired or his place was messy. At the time, I thought it was just normal online stuff, but looking back, it was all red flags. The whole thing was so surreal, it felt like something you'd hear about from a friend of a friend, not something that would actually happen to you. It definitely made me way more cautious about believing what someone says online. I deleted our whole conversation thread and blocked the account, but part of me wonders if his mom forced him to delete it too, or if he just made another fake account somewhere else. He seemed way too casual about getting caught for it to be his last time. I drove home that night without eating, just replaying the scene in my head. The yelling, the way people were staring, how young he actually looked up close. I don't think I'll ever forget it. Easily one of the most awkward nights of my life. I don't usually fall for people who say they're influencers. Honestly, I think most of them exaggerate what they do. But Amzi seemed different, or at least that's what I thought. She wasn't the kind of influencer who flexes luxury brands or posts about vacations in Bali. Her whole thing was body positivity. She talked about self-love, embracing who you are, not letting society shame you. The kind of message that usually feels fake coming from someone, but the way she wrote about it sounded real. Her captions were long, she told stories about growing up insecure, and she always replied to comments on her posts. When we started talking, she came across like she actually believed in all of it. She wasn't trying to be glamorous in our conversations, just normal. She'd say things like she was exhausted from filming or annoyed that trolls kept making rude comments. She said meeting supportive people made it worth it. And yeah, I fell for that. I thought, all right, maybe this one's genuine. We talked for a while before meeting. Nothing rushed. She said she wanted to be careful because of weird followers she'd had. That made sense, so I didn't press. We planned to meet at a cafe, one of those trendy ones with mismatched chairs and plants hanging from the ceiling. When I got there, I ordered a coffee and waited. She walked in about 10 minutes later. I recognized her instantly from her posts. Same dyed hair, same smile. But in person, she seemed different. Not just because photos can be filtered, but because her energy was off. She wasn't bubbly. She looked tense, like she had rehearsed walking through the door. We sat down, and I noticed she wasn't really drinking her coffee, just stirring it over and over. She kept glancing around, not at me. I tried to get her to relax by making small talk, asking about her videos and how she got into the body positivity thing. That's when everything flipped. She leaned forward, lowered her voice, and told me she hadn't been honest. At first, I thought she was going to say she was older or younger than her profile said. But no, she told me she wasn't actually a body positive influencer. That part was real in the sense that the account was hers, but the whole self-love message wasn't what she believed in. She said the account was part of an experiment. And then she admitted she'd been using my photos. That hit me like a slap. She had taken my pictures, the ones I had on my own profile, and used them in some campaign she was running. She said it was supposed to expose hypocrisy. According to her, she was part of this online group that hated people who promoted body positivity because they thought it encouraged being unhealthy. She'd taken my photos and posted them under fake accounts with captions mocking overweight women. She said the whole thing was meant to stir people up, make them angry, so they could prove a point. I just sat there stunned, trying to process. She kept talking like she had been holding this confession in and finally needed to unload it. She said she chose me because I looked like the type of guy who would fall for the body positivity act, and she wanted to see how far she could push it before telling me the truth. She said meeting me in person was her way of closing the loop, like it was just a part of her weird little social experiment. The worst part, she wasn't apologetic. Not even a little. She talked about it like she was proud, like she'd been clever. She said she thought it would be interesting to see my reaction when I found out. I kept thinking about how many people might have seen those fake posts with my face on them. My mind was spinning, imagining strangers out there commenting on pictures of me, not knowing the context. I asked her why she even bothered meeting me if the whole thing was fake. She said it was because most people online never get closure, and she wanted to document how I'd handle it. That word stuck with me, document. It made me realize she probably wasn't just telling me. She might have been recording somehow. I even glanced around to see if there was a phone set up nearby, but I didn't see one. She kept going, saying she didn't actually care about body positivity. She thought it was a scam, and she used my pictures because they were neutral. Neutral. Like I was just a stock image she could throw around. She talked so casually about it, like none of this was personal. Meanwhile, my heart was pounding and my hands were sweating. I didn't even know how to respond. People around us were just drinking lats and working on laptops, completely oblivious to the fact that my whole identity had just been dragged into some stranger's twisted project. I wanted to walk out, but I also wanted answers. I asked her if the posts were still up, if people were still using my pictures. She smirked and said probably because once something's out there, you can't really take it back. That's when it really sank in. Even if she deleted them, other people in her group could have saved them, reposted them, done whatever. My face could be floating around online connected to messages I'd never say. That feeling stuck in my stomach like a rock. I didn't finish my drink. I just stood up and left. She didn't try to stop me. She just stayed there stirring her coffee again, like the whole thing had been a business meeting. When I got outside, I walked fast without even knowing where I was going. My phone buzzed with a new message. It was her. She sent me a long paragraph about how I should be grateful she was honest, that most people never get to meet the person behind the mask. I blocked her right there on the sidewalk. Later that night, I went through every social account I had, searching my own name and scrolling deep into random hashtags, just trying to see if any of those posts popped up. I didn't find anything at first, but that didn't calm me down. The internet's too big. I'll never know where those pictures went. It's wild because when I first saw her account, I thought she was spreading positivity. In reality, she was the exact opposite, hiding behind this polished image while using people like props. If she hadn't slipped up and admitted it, I would have kept believing her brand was real. I still wonder how many of her followers think she's this inspiring person while she's laughing behind their backs. The whole thing messed with me more than I thought it would. It wasn't just about being a liar. It was about realizing how fragile your identity is once someone else gets a hold of it. I can change my passwords, lock down my socials, but I can't erase the fact that someone out there might be using my face to spread hate. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying her calm voice telling me it was just an experiment. To her, I was nothing but a variable. To me, it was my whole life being dragged into something I never signed up for.
Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories.
I wasn't even looking for anything serious when I matched with Monty. I had just gotten out of a messy situation, and honestly, I was kind of swept me out of boredom. His profile caught my attention because it wasn't flashy. No shirtless gym selfies, no overdone vacation pics. Just a guy standing in his kitchen holding a coffee mug, another one of him with his dog, and one of him at a playground with two kids in the background. His bio was short too. Divorced, dad of two, just looking for something simple. That sounded refreshing compared to all the guys bragging about their crypto portfolios or cars. He messaged first, nothing corny, just asking what I like to do on weekends. The conversation flowed easy after that. He talked about cooking for his kids, co-parenting with his ex, trying to balance work and family life. It all made him seem mature, like he'd been through things and wasn't into games. I kind of liked the idea of someone grounded, someone who wasn't afraid to admit life was messy. We met at a casual bar, one of those neighborhood spots where the lights are dim and there's always a game on TV. He walked in wearing jeans and a hoodie, not dressed to impress, just comfortable. He looked like his pictures, maybe a little older around the eyes, but still solid. We sat at the bar, ordered drinks, and the conversation kept rolling. He was easy to talk to, didn't overshare, but gave enough that I felt like he was being real. He talked about his kids, one in elementary, one a little older, and how they loved going to the park. He even showed me a picture on his phone of them with their dog. It looked normal, like any parent showing off their kids. By the end of the night, I felt good about it. Nothing over the top, just a nice evening. He walked me to my car, gave me a hug, and said he'd like to see me again. It wasn't awkward. It felt safe, I guess. The second date, that's when everything cracked open. We decided to go for a late lunch on a Saturday. He suggested a diner not far from where he lived, said it was easy because he just dropped his kids off with his ex-wife. That detail stuck in my head. He always said ex-wife, not just ex. Anyway, we sat down, ordered burgers, and were talking about random stuff when his phone started buzzing. At first, he ignored it, but it kept lighting up, so he finally answered. I could hear the screaming even though I was across the table. A woman's voice, loud and furious. He looked panicked, tried to calm her down, but she just kept yelling. He excused himself and walked outside with the phone. I sat there pretending to look at the menu, but my stomach was sinking. A couple minutes later, he came back looking pale. He muttered something about sorry, drama, and tried to change the subject, but before he could, the door of the diner swung open. This woman stormed in. I knew instantly it was her. She was red in the face, holding her phone in one hand, and she locked eyes on him like a missile. She marched straight to our table and started going off, loud. Everyone in the diner turned to watch. She called him a liar, a cheater, a manipulator. She said they weren't divorced, not even separated, and that he'd been bringing women around their kids behind her back. She pointed at me and said I was the third one this month. Third. I just sat frozen while this whole scene exploded around me. He tried to calm her, saying she was overreacting, but she wasn't having it. She pulled up texts on her phone, showing him promising her they'd work things out and keep the family together. She shouted that the kids were confused, that they thought their dad was just hanging out with friends, and now they were asking questions about all these women. The worst part, he didn't deny it. He just sat there looking guilty, trying to shush her because of the scene, but never actually saying she was wrong. That told me everything I needed to know. People in the diner were whispering, some shaking their heads. The waitress looked like she wanted to disappear. I wanted to disappear too. I felt this hot wave of embarrassment, like everyone was looking at me thinking I was part of some scandal. His ex-wife kept going, telling me directly that he was a liar, that he was dragging his kids into his games, that I should run. I grabbed my bag and stood up. I didn't say a word to either of them, just walked out. I could still hear her yelling as I hit the parking lot. My hands were shaking unlocking my car. I sat there for a second before starting it, just trying to process what had just happened. When I drove off, my phone buzzed. It was him texting me. He wrote something like, "Sorry you had to see that, she's just bitter." I didn't answer. A few minutes later, another text. "It's complicated, but I really like you." I blocked his number. Later that night, I kept thinking about the kids. The fact that he was dragging them into this, introducing them to different women while telling the mom he wanted to fix things, it made me sick. It wasn't just lying to me, it was messing with his own family. That picture he showed me of his kids and the dog suddenly felt creepy, like I wasn't supposed to be seeing it. The part that haunted me was how normal he seemed at first. Just a guy who'd been through a divorce, raising kids, trying to date again. That's the story he sold me, and it was believable. But the reality was way messier, and he didn't care who got caught in it. His wife, his kids, random women like me. He was fine juggling it all until it blew up in public. I never saw him again, obviously. But I can't forget the look on his face when she barged into that diner. He wasn't shocked she was saying those things. He was just shocked she showed up in person. That tells me he knew exactly what he was doing. He just didn't think he'd get caught in front of me. The whole situation stuck with me longer than I wanted it to. It wasn't just about him lying, it was about realizing how easily people can perform a whole different life online. All it took was a few pictures with his kids, some vague stories about being divorced, and I believed him. He knew exactly what to say to sound responsible, stable, like someone you could trust. Meanwhile, he was still married, still stringing his wife along, and dragging strangers into his family drama. I'm not even angry about wasting my time with him. What makes me angry is that there are kids in the middle of all that chaos, and they don't get a choice. It started kind of boring, honestly. I wasn't even planning on meeting anyone serious. I just had this habit of scrolling before bed when I couldn't sleep. Lydia's profile popped up, and she had that sort of simple look that didn't scream fake, not overly filtered, no angles that looked suspicious. Just normal photos, her sitting on a picnic blanket with a glass of wine, one of her in an office-looking space with sticky notes on the wall, and another in some street market holding a coffee. It gave off busy but fun energy. Her bio said she worked in marketing and loved trying out new restaurants. Pretty standard, but it felt safe. The thing that got me was how quick she replied when we started chatting. Like, most people take a while, but she was right there, almost too quick sometimes. We talked about food, favorite places in the city, and she told me she was into branding and social media campaigns. That matched the office photo, so it all lined up. She was funny too, making little sarcastic jokes that felt easygoing. We set up a plan to meet after just a couple days. We picked this tapas spot downtown. kind of noisy, crowded with groups of friends and couples, not exactly romantic, but lively. I got there a little early. I kept looking around for the girl in the photos. After about 15 minutes, this person waved me over. At first, I didn't even realize they were waving at me because it wasn't her. It was a man. He walked up, slid into the seat across from me, and introduced himself as Lydia. My brain short-circuited for a second. He was grinning like it was a joke, like I should already be in on it. I didn't laugh. I was confused and honestly kind of creeped out. He leaned in, lowered his voice, and started explaining before I could even say anything. He told me straight up that he wasn't Lydia, that the photos weren't him, and that he didn't work in marketing. He said he ran multiple accounts, all using pictures of different women. Apparently, I wasn't the only guy he was meeting. He said he did it to get reactions, to see how men behaved when the fantasy broke. He said he'd been doing it for years and shared the results with this private chat group he was part of. I sat there staring, trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank. He wasn't acting nervous, he was calm, almost proud. He explained that he'd been recording reactions. Some guys yelled, some stormed out, others tried to play along. He said those were the best, the ones who tried to salvage the date even though it was clearly fake. He laughed while telling me this like I should think it was hilarious too. The whole time he talked, I couldn't stop glancing around the restaurant, wondering if someone was filming me from another table. I scanned the corners, checked if there was a phone propped up somewhere. Nothing obvious, but that didn't make me feel better. He kept going like this was a presentation. He said people in his group loved watching the footage, that they'd swap stories about the men they tricked. He told me one guy once cried in the middle of dinner. He said another punched the wall outside a bar. He said it was fascinating how men reacted when they felt deceived. His words, not mine. I couldn't eat. My stomach was twisted up. I asked him why he chose the name Lydia and the whole marketing backstory. He shrugged and said it was easy to maintain, that people don't question women who say they work in marketing because it sounds professional, but not too flashy. He admitted the photos weren't random. He'd picked them carefully from someone's real account, probably without them ever knowing. That part made me feel sick too. Somewhere out there was a real woman whose pictures were being used to lure people like me. The weirdest part was how casual he made it sound. He didn't see himself as a scammer or criminal. He described it like it was just a hobby. Like some people collect coins or play video games, he collected reactions. He told me straight-faced that he preferred in-person meetups because they got better content than just online chats. I barely said anything. I just listened, because what else could I do? It was too public to cause a scene, but my brain was racing. I thought about all the messages we exchanged. In pretending to be this woman, asking me about food and branding, cracking jokes. All of that was fake. Every word typed out had been calculated to keep me hooked until I showed up. After a while, I cut him off mid-sentence and said I had to leave. He didn't even seem offended. He just nodded and said, "Cool, thanks for being part of it." Part of it. Like I had just been enrolled into some experiment against my will. I walked out of the restaurant and didn't look back. I kept checking behind me on the street, half expecting him to follow or someone else to pop out with a camera. No one did, but it didn't stop me from feeling watched. That night, I went through the whole conversation thread on my phone. It was surreal to read it knowing none of it was from the person I thought I was talking to. I deleted everything and blocked the profile, but deep down I knew that wouldn't matter. He probably had 10 more fake accounts running at the same time. What messed me up wasn't just the lie, but how normal it all seemed before the reveal. Leah didn't come across as exaggerated or suspicious. She just seemed like a busy, funny person. And then suddenly, she was a man sitting across from me, explaining how my humiliation was going to be entertainment for strangers in some group chat. I don't know if anyone else in the restaurant realized what was happening that night. To them, it probably looked like two people having dinner. But for me, it was one of the most unsettling hours I've ever sat through. When I got home, I locked my phone in a drawer. Didn't want to look at dating apps, didn't want to scroll anything. It wasn't just that I'd been lied to. It was the thought of being used without permission, like my reactions were just data points in somebody's little side project. That's the part that lingers even now. I'll never know if I was recorded. I'll never know if strangers in some group laughed at the way I looked when the truth came out. He wanted me to feel like just another number in his collection, and in a way, he got what he wanted. I didn't even meet Dan on a dating app. That's the funny part. I met him at a coffee shop, the kind of place where everyone has laptops open and pretends they're working on something important. I was waiting for my order, and he was standing right behind me in line. Somehow we started talking about books because I had one in my hand, and he said he was into psychology. Normally, I don't give strangers the time of day, but he had this calm way of speaking like he read every book ever written and nothing surprised him anymore. We ended up sitting down with our coffees. He told me he was a trauma counselor. I asked that he worked in an office, and he said no, he had his own practice and kept things private. He went on about how he helped people unpack their pain, how he listened to women who had been through things and guided them to a better place. The way he said it, it sounded noble, like he wasn't doing it for money, but because he cared. That first conversation lasted almost 2 hours. He asked me questions, not in a pushy way, more like he was genuinely interested. I didn't notice at the time how specific his questions were. Things about my childhood, my past relationships, what I struggled with. I left that coffee shop feeling lighter, like I just had a free therapy session. He gave me his number and said if I ever wanted to chat more, I should reach out. We texted for a couple weeks before meeting again. Most of the time, he'd message late at night, saying he just finished a heavy session with a client and needed to unwind. He'd always sprinkle in little details about the struggles he helped people with, how much he cared about their progress. It made him sound important, like he carried the weight of other people's lives on his shoulders. The second time we met, he suggested a quiet lounge near his place. We sat in the corner booth, low lights, soft music, the kind of spot where people talk about serious things. He leaned in the whole time, asking more personal questions. By then, I was so used to opening up to him that I didn't notice how much I was revealing. I told him things I hadn't told people I'd known for years. And the way he nodded, the way he kept eye contact, made me feel like I was safe. We started seeing each other more often, sometimes under the excuse of sessions, sometimes just casual hangs. He never charged me, never mentioned money. That made me trust him more, because I thought, who does free counseling unless they really care? But little by little, things started to feel off. One night, I searched his name online. I don't know why. Something in my gut told me to. I couldn't find anything. No website for his practice, no credentials, not even a LinkedIn page. It didn't make sense. Every professional I ever met had some kind of footprint online, but with him, it was like he didn't exist. I asked him about it the next time we talked. He smiled and said he didn't like to advertise himself because word of mouth was enough. That answer was too smooth, too ready. It didn't feel right. The breaking point came weeks later. I was scrolling through podcasts on Spotify, just looking for something to play in the background, when I stumbled on one with a weird title. The description said it was about exposing hidden truths about human behavior. Out of curiosity, I hit play. The voice on the recording was his. At first, I thought maybe it was legit, maybe he was sharing professional advice. But as I listened, my stomach dropped. He was laughing with another guy, bragging about the things women had told him. Personal things. Secret things. Some of the stories were word for word the ones I had told him. He didn't use names, but the details were too exact. I knew he was talking about me. And not just me. He was talking about other women too. He described how easy it was to get women to trust him by saying he was a counselor. He explained how people are more open when they think they're being guided. He joked about how fast women spill secrets if you just tilt your head and nod. The podcast wasn't about helping anyone. It was about mocking them. It was entertainment for him and whoever listened. I sat there frozen with my headphones on, reading back through our texts while his voice played in my ears. Every late-night message about needing to decompress suddenly made sense. He wasn't decompressing. He was collecting. The next time he texted me, I didn't reply. He followed up with a voice message, his calm voice asking if I was okay, saying he was worried about me. I deleted it. A couple days later, he sent a long paragraph about how he thought we had made progress together, and that shutting it out wasn't healthy. That part made my skin crawl. The way he used therapist language to manipulate me even outside of a session. I blocked his number, but I couldn't stop thinking about how many other women he'd done this to. How many secrets he was storing, laughing about, turning into podcast material. I checked the podcast again, and there were dozens of episodes. Each one was another collection of stories stolen from women who thought they were being helped. The thing that still gets to me isn't even what he read about me. It's that he was so convincing. He had the tone, the mannerisms, the whole act down to science. If you didn't dig deeper, you'd never know he wasn't licensed, that he wasn't real, and most people wouldn't dig deeper. They'd just trust. I never saw him again, but I kept the memory of sitting in that coffee shop for the first time, feeling lighter because he listened. Now it feels heavy because I know none of it was genuine. He wasn't helping me heal. He was collecting ammo for his side project. Sometimes I wonder how many people listened to that podcast and laughed, not realizing the stories were about real women who thought they were confiding in someone safe. And somewhere in those recordings, there's my voice too, hidden in the details he stole. The whole thing with Rose kicked off on a random Thursday night when I was just scrolling and half bored. I wasn't even planning on meeting anyone new that week, but her profile popped up and I stopped scrolling. The pictures looked good. She wasn't posing like she was trying too hard, just regular photos that looked like they could have been snapped by a friend. One was her in a sundress standing by a lake, another sitting at a bar with a drink in her hand, and one of her holding a cat. She looked approachable, like the type of person you'd bump into at the grocery store, and actually start a conversation with. Her bio was short, just said she was into cooking and hiking, and that she wanted to meet someone real. That line stuck in my head because half the profiles I see just sound like recycled nonsense, but hers felt plain and honest. We started messaging, and she was easy to talk to. Not overly flirty, not dry either, just normal. I figured she was worth meeting in person. We made plans for dinner at this mid-range restaurant downtown. Nothing fancy, just a decent place with booths, decent lighting, and a menu that had something for everyone. I got there a little early, grabbed a booth, and waited. When she walked in, I recognized her immediately. She looked like her photos, same hair, same smile. I thought I got lucky for once because most of the time, the person doesn't look exactly like the pictures. She slid into the booth across from me, and we started talking. It was fine at first, just regular first date conversation. Work, hobbies, the usual what you'd like to do on weekends type stuff. She ordered pasta, I got a burger, and everything seemed normal. But then about 15 minutes in, she leaned back and said there was something I should know. I figured it was the classic reveal. Maybe she had a kid, or maybe she was a little older than she'd said. Nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Before I could even ask, this guy walked over to the booth. At first, I thought he was a waiter coming to check on us, but he slid into the seat right next to her. He was wearing a leather jacket and had this smug look on his face. Rose introduced him as her husband. I thought she was joking, she wasn't. My brain went blank for a second. I sat there staring at both of them while they explained. They said they hunt cheaters. Those were her words, hunt cheaters. They went on about how they set up fake profiles, reel people in, then confront them in public to expose them. I was so caught off guard I couldn't even get my words out. My first thought was, cheaters? I wasn't even cheating. I was single, just dating like everyone else. But they didn't care. Her husband pulled out his phone and showed me that he had been recording the entire interaction since the moment she sat down. He said they post the videos online, that they run a whole page dedicated to outing people. He kept saying they were doing justice. Rose nodded along like she was proud of it. I couldn't wrap my head around what was happening. They accused me of being unfaithful, of sneaking around on my partner. I told them I didn't even have a partner, that I was single, but they smirked like they'd heard it all before. Rose said men always claimed to be single, that I was lying, and that's exactly why they do this, to show the world how many liars are out there. The husband kept holding the phone up, making sure my face was clear in the frame. The whole restaurant had started to notice. People at the tables nearby were looking over, trying to figure out what was going on. My ears burned. I wanted to disappear. I kept saying I wasn't in a relationship, but they weren't listening. They were too busy narrating the whole scene for their video, saying stuff like, "This is what happens when you try to sneak around." At that point, my food had gone cold. My appetite was gone anyway. I tried to get up to leave, but the husband blocked my way with his arm and told me to sit back down. He said they wanted to finish the segment. Like I was just part of some show they were producing. Rose kept pressing me with questions about who I was really with, how many women I was talking to, if I had a girlfriend at home. Every time I said no, they'd laugh like I was lying. Eventually, I just pushed past the guy and walked out. My heart was pounding, and I could feel everyone's eyes on me as I left the restaurant. Out in the parking lot, I could still hear them laughing inside. I got in my car and just sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel, trying to figure out what had just happened. That night, I searched online to see if they were telling the truth about posting videos. I found their page. It was real. Dozens of videos of different men sitting across from rows at restaurants, coffee shops, even parks, with a husband showing up halfway through to confront them. Some of the guys looked like they were genuinely caught cheating, others just looked confused like me. The comment sections were full of people cheering them on, saying how brave they were for exposing liars. Scrolling through those videos made my stomach twist. The idea that my face might end up on there, painted as some cheater when I wasn't, made me feel sick. I checked every few days for weeks, half terrified and half furious, but my video never popped up. Maybe they didn't like my reaction. Maybe it wasn't dramatic enough. Or maybe they just kept it for their own little collection. Either way, the damage was done. The whole experience stuck with me because it was so out of left field. I went into that dinner thinking it was just a first date, and I ended up part of some twisted vigilante act. It wasn't just catfishing, it was performance, and I was the unwilling actor. I stopped using dating apps for a long time after that. Not because I thought I'd run into more people like Rose, but because I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped in someone else's storyline. She looked so normal in her profile pictures, and yet behind it was this whole bizarre scheme. I'll never forget the way she sat across from me, smiling like it was just dinner, while knowing the whole time her husband was waiting to jump in. It felt calculated, like they'd done it so many times that it was routine. For me, it was a nightmare. For them, it was just Thursday night content. The first thing that stood out about Tian wasn't even his looks, it was the way he talked about money. His profile was full of little flexes, but not in the look at my abs and Rolex kind of way. More like pictures of him standing in front of fancy cars, hanging out by pools, and sitting at restaurants where the plates looked like art. His bio said, self-made millionaire before 30 and living life on my terms. Normally, I roll my eyes at that kind of thing, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to know if it was for real. We started chatting, and he was charming. He told me about deals he was working on, investments, and this business mindset he said most people didn't have. He'd send voice notes where he sounded so confident, like he knew exactly what he was doing in life. He kept telling me he wanted to show me his world. After a week of talking, he invited me to see his place. He said he didn't like wasting time at restaurants when he had better wine and better food at home. I hesitated for a second, but the way he described his house, big, modern with floor-to-ceiling windows and a deck that overlooked the city, got me curious enough to agree. He pulled up in a car I'd only ever seen in movies. It was spotless, low to the ground, and loud when he revved it. I climbed in, and the inside smelled like new leather. He said it was his baby, one of several cars he owned. I was impressed, not gonna lie. When we got to his place, I was even more impressed. It looked like something out of an architecture magazine. Clean white walls, sharp lines, modern furniture. There was artwork on the walls, a huge TV, and the kind of kitchen you see on cooking shows. He poured wine into giant glasses and gave me a little tour. Every room looked perfect. He said he had multiple properties and liked to bounce between them depending on his mood. The night went well. He cooked pasta, told me stories about traveling, about how he and his brother built their wealth from scratch. It all sounded believable, mostly because he didn't brag too much. He talked about it like it was just a normal life, like having millions was no big deal. I left thinking maybe I had lucked out meeting someone successful who wasn't a total jerk about it. It was the second time I saw him that everything started to unravel. He invited me again, but this time I noticed small details I hadn't the first night. For starters, there were no personal touches in the house. No photos, no mail on the counters, no sign of someone actually living there. It felt staged. Even the closets looked too neat, like they'd been arranged by a decorator. While he was in the kitchen, I noticed a little booklet on the coffee table with an Airbnb logo on it. My stomach dropped. I asked him about it, and for a second, he froze. Then he laughed it off, saying the booklet must have been left by the cleaners. But the more I looked around, the more it made sense. The house didn't feel lived in because it wasn't his. I didn't say anything right away, but the next time he invited me over, I did my own digging. Before heading there, I searched Airbnb in that area. Sure enough, I found the exact same house listed for rent with identical pictures. Same art, same kitchen, same furniture. The listing even had the same little booklet I'd seen. When I showed up that night, I couldn't stop staring at him differently. Everything he said about being a millionaire, about building wealth, about having multiple houses, it was all fake. I realized the car probably wasn't his either. Maybe it was rented, maybe it belonged to someone else. He was putting on a whole show. I finally asked him straight up how many of his stories were true. At first, he tried to smooth talk me, saying people always doubted him because of jealousy. But when I pressed harder, his whole tone changed. He admitted he didn't actually own the place. He said he and his brother ran a business where they staged properties to make people think they were rich. They'd rent out Airbnbs, park expensive cars outside, and invite people over to impress them. Sometimes they use it to lure women, sometimes to convince investors to hand over money. He admitted the watch he showed off online wasn't real either. It was a high-end replica. I sat there stunned while he explained it like it was no big deal. He said image was everything, that people only respected you if you looked rich, so they created the image. He even bragged about how easy it was to fool people. He told me most women never questioned it. They just enjoyed the ride, took the pictures, and bragged to their friends. He said I was too observant for my own good. The whole thing made my skin crawl. I thought back to that first night when he cooked pasta, poured wine, and told me about his life. None of it was real. I wasn't sitting in his kitchen. I was sitting in some random person's Airbnb while he played house. I didn't stay long after that. I made up an excuse about being tired and left. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about how many people he must have tricked with this routine. It was polished like he'd done it dozens of times before. The car, the house, the story about being a millionaire, it was a package deal. A couple days later, I checked the Airbnb listing again, and the calendar showed it was booked for weeks. I couldn't help wondering if it was him again, using it to pull the same trick on someone else. What stuck with me most wasn't even the lies. It was how comfortable he was living inside them. He didn't see himself as fake. To him, the performance was just another hustle. He kept saying, "Fake it till you make it," like that excused everything. But to me, it was pathetic. He wasn't a self-made millionaire. He was a guy renting Airbnbs and pretending to be someone he wasn't. That was the last time I saw him. I blocked his number and deleted the thread, but I still think about how easy it was for him to pull it off. He knew exactly how to present himself so no one would question it. And for a while I didn't. I bought into the image just like he wanted. Looking back, the funniest part is the pasta. He made such a big deal about cooking it himself, like it was some sign of being real even though everything else was fake. That pasta was probably the only genuine thing about the entire night. The way I met Vanessa was kind of random. It wasn't through an app or even social media. It was at a friend's birthday party. One of those low-key house gatherings where people bring their own drinks. Music's playing off someone's playlist, and everyone's half sitting, half standing around the kitchen. She showed up late, walked in with a couple friends, and ended up sitting next to me on the couch while we were all laughing about some dumb story. She was easy to talk to, not the loudest in the room, but she had this calm way of listening and then throwing in something funny at the right moment. We ended up talking about food, traveling, and random stuff until most people had drifted off to the backyard. At the end of the night, she gave me her number and told me we should grab drinks sometime. It felt natural, not forced. Over the next week, we texted back and forth. She told me she was single, worked in research, and liked keeping things private. That didn't sound too weird to me. Plenty of people don't like putting their job details out right away. She was consistent, not the type to ghost for a few days and then pop back. We set up a plan to meet at a bar downtown. The place we picked was one of those spots that's always busy but not loud enough that you can't talk. Dim lights, booths along the walls, bartenders shaking cocktails like it was a performance. When she walked in, she looked like her photos, no surprises. Dark hair, sharp eyes, casual clothes but put together. She smiled when she saw me, slid into the booth, and we ordered drinks. At first, everything was fine. We joked about how awkward dating can be, talked about our friends, even swapped embarrassing stories. She was leaning in, laughing, making eye contact, the kind of stuff that makes you think the night's going well. But about an hour in, after her second drink, the mood shifted. She got quieter, not in a shy way, but like she was debating something in her head. Finally, she put her glass down and said there was something I should know. My stomach tightened, because usually when someone says that, it's never good. She told me she wasn't really there to date me. She admitted she was a private investigator. I laughed at first, thinking she was messing with me, but she didn't laugh back. She stared at me dead serious and said she'd been hired to look into me. I didn't know what to say. She leaned in closer and said my ex had hired her. That's when everything inside me went cold. My ex, the one I hadn't spoken to in months, the one I thought was finally out of my life, had apparently paid Vanessa to dig into me. And Vanessa hadn't just been digging, she'd been pretending to be interested in me as part of her job. I asked her why she was even telling me. She shrugged and said sometimes people deserve to know. She explained that most of the time her clients never wanted the target to find out, but she said she didn't like lying longer than she had to. She admitted that meeting me at the party wasn't random. She'd been there on purpose. My ex had mutual friends with a birthday girl, and Vanessa showed up to bump into me. The more she talked, the worse it got. She told me she'd been watching me online for weeks before we even met. She'd combed through my socials, read old posts, followed who I followed. She said she'd even driven past my apartment once to confirm I lived where my profile said I did. She described it all so casually, like it wasn't completely insane. She said my ex wanted proof that I was moving on too quickly. Proof of me dating again so she could use it as ammo in some ongoing grudge she was carrying. Vanessa admitted she didn't think it was worth her time, but since she was being paid, she did the job. Sitting there across from her, my head was spinning. I kept looking around the bar, wondering if there was someone else nearby taking pictures, recording the whole thing. I asked her straight up if she was still working for my ex. She hesitated, then said technically yes, but this was her way of ending it. She said she'd file her report and be done. I didn't even finish my drink. I felt sick. All that casual texting, the feeling of meeting someone new, it wasn't real. It was her gathering information. Every joke I made, every detail I shared was just part of her notes. I wondered if she had a file somewhere with my name on it, filled with screenshots and summaries of everything I'd said. Before I left, she said something that stuck with me. She said, "Don't be surprised if she keeps tabs another way. People like her rarely let go." Then she wished me luck and smiled like we'd just had a normal date. I walked out of the bar in a daze. The night air felt sharp, and every sound on the street made me think I was being followed. I got in my car and sat there for a while before driving home. The idea that someone had been watching me, not just casually but as part of a paid job, made my skin crawl. That night, I went through my socials, deleting posts, locking things down, making everything private. But part of me knew it didn't matter. If Vanessa had already dug, the information was out there. My ex already had whatever she wanted. The weirdest part is how normal Vanessa looked sitting there across from me. Just a woman on a date, sipping a cocktail. But behind that calm face, she'd been hired to investigate me. It wasn't personal to her. It was work. That's what makes it worse. To her, I was just another assignment. I haven't seen her since. I don't even know if she's still in contact with my ex or if she really ended it after that night. But I'll never forget the way she told me. No drama, no build-up, just straight-faced. I'm a private investigator and I was hired by your ex. Like ripping the rug out from under me in one sentence. Ever since then, I catch myself second-guessing new people I meet. Was that random introduction really random? Did that new follower on Instagram stumble across my page? Or are they watching me? Vanessa put cracks in my trust that haven't really gone away. And the scariest part. She was good at it. If she hadn't decided to tell me, I never would have known. I wasn't even looking for anyone serious when I started talking to Chris. I was just killing time after work, scrolling through profiles while half watching TV. His caught my eye because he said he was a marine biologist. That's not something you see every day. Most guys are into fitness or work in tech, but he had photos of himself on boats, standing by tanks full of fish, even one where he was holding what looked like a baby shark. His bio mentioned his love for the ocean, studying ecosystems, and protecting wildlife. I thought that was cool. Different. We started messaging, and he actually knew what he was talking about. He'd mentioned coral bleaching, sea turtle migrations, random facts about jellyfish. He didn't sound like he was Googling it on the spot. He sounded legit. And he wasn't dry either. He cracked jokes, asked about my life, and kept the conversation light. After a week of back and forth, I figured he was worth meeting. He suggested I come by his place. Normally, I don't go to someone's place right away, but he said he had aquariums set up and could show me some behind-the-scenes stuff from his work. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what a marine biologist place looked like. When I showed up, the outside of his apartment looked normal. Just a regular building, nothing fancy. But the second I stepped inside, I knew something was off. The smell hit me first, a mix of chemicals, fish, and something sour I couldn't place. The living room was dim, lit by the glow of multiple fish tanks, but they weren't the clean professional setups I expected. They were cloudy, unkempt, with dead plants floating inside. At first, I thought maybe he just hadn't cleaned them recently, but as I walked further in, I noticed things that made my stomach twist. There were jars lined up on shelves with murky liquid inside, and inside the jars were preserved fish, crabs, and other sea creatures. On one wall, he had what looked like a DIY display of mounted specimens. Not artfully done, just crudely pinned and framed. Taxidermy, but sloppy and disturbing. Chris walked in behind me like everything was normal. He started pointing things out, explaining what each creature was, where he found it, how rare it was. He talked with excitement like a kid showing off toys, but the way he described them didn't sound scientific. It sounded obsessive. He wasn't talking about conservation. He was talking about collecting. I tried to act normal, but inside I was uneasy. I asked him about his work, where he actually studied marine biology. He dodged the question, saying he'd done research in different places, but never naming a specific institution. He quickly changed the subject, pulling me toward his computer. On his screen, he had folders filled with videos. He opened one up, and my heart sank. It wasn't footage of marine life. It was footage of him. Not just him, but him pretending to be different people. Each video looked like it was recorded for a dating app. Different outfits, different backdrops, different accents even. One clip had him pretending to be a surfer, another had him acting like a fitness trainer, another like a traveler showing off landscapes. He clicked through them like it was no big deal, explaining that he used different personas depending on what type of woman he was trying to meet. He laughed about how easy it was to fool people, how each character reeled in a different type. My stomach turned. I realized the marine biologist persona was just one of many. I wasn't talking to Chris the scientist. I was talking to Chris the collector, not just of animals, but of people. He showed me dozens of fake profiles, all active. Pictures stolen, names tweaked, bios crafted to fit whatever story he wanted to tell. He bragged about how some women sent him money, others sent private photos, and some even traveled to meet him. He said he loved the thrill of pretending to be someone else, and the more believable the role, the better. I asked him why he was showing me all this. He smirked and said most people never got to see behind the curtain, but he thought I was cool enough to handle it. He said most women would freak out, but he wanted to see if I'd stick around. I didn't even know how to respond. My skin felt tight, like I needed to get out of there immediately, but I didn't want to set him off. He was too comfortable in his own world, surrounded by his tanks and jars, bragging about his schemes. I nodded, pretended to be interested, and after a while, I made an excuse about needing to get up early. As I walked out, I noticed a pile of printed photos on a desk by the door. They were headshots of different women, some smiling selfies, others cropped from social media. On the back of each photo, he'd scribbled notes. Likes hiking, prefers dogs, trusting. My throat went dry. He was cataloging people like he cataloged his dead fish. The second I got in my car, I locked the doors and drove off. My hands were shaking on the wheel the whole way home. I kept picturing his smile as he scrolled through fake profiles, his excitement showing me jars of preserved animals like they were trophies. That night, I deleted every message thread we had and blocked his number. But I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head. His apartment, the smell, the glow of tanks filled with dying fish. The folders on his computer filled with fake lives. The stack of women's photos with notes scribbled like research. What scared me most wasn't just that he lied. It was that he had no shame about it. He wasn't hiding his hobby, he was proud of it. To him, everything, women, animals, identities, was something to collect and display. I'll never forget the way he said it. Different personas for different types, like we were nothing but experiments to him. And somewhere out there, dozens of women are probably still talking to one of his characters, not realizing it's the same man behind the curtain. When I matched with Amanda, it didn't feel like anything special at first. She wasn't the type to come in with some flashy line or overly done photos. Her profile was simple, a couple pictures of her at coffee shops, one of her with a dog, and a short bio that said she was into writing and photography. I figured she was just another artsy type who liked lats and taking pictures of sunsets. What made me actually stick around was how she messaged. She wasn't trying to impress me. She'd ask regular questions, then follow up with more like she was actually paying attention. Most people on those FTAP respond, but Amanda remembered details. If I said I had a rough day at work, she'd ask about it the next day. If I mentioned a band I liked, she'd send me a random link to a live performance. It felt like talking to someone who actually cared. After a couple weeks of that, I figured we might as well meet. We agreed on this cozy cafe that was kind of hidden away on a side street. The place had plants hanging everywhere, chopboard menus, and indie music playing low in the background. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a mug. She looked like her pictures, which was already a good sign. From the start, she had this warm energy. She leaned in when I talked, laughed easily, and asked good questions. Not the generic, so what do you do? Questions, but deeper stuff, like what I thought about moving to a new city or what my family was like. It almost felt like she was interviewing me, but in a way that didn't feel heavy. I chalked it out to her being curious. We ended up staying there for hours. The conversation never stalled, and by the time we left, it felt like we'd known each other longer than a couple weeks. I went home that night thinking I might have actually stumbled onto someone worth getting to know. But on the second date, things shifted. She invited me to meet at this bar that had a lid band. It was loud enough that we couldn't really have deep conversations, which I thought was fine. We'd already done that at the cafe. She seemed distracted, though, like her mind was somewhere else. At one point, I caught her glancing at her phone a lot, not just checking messages, but typing quickly, then locking the screen whenever I looked over. I brushed it off until halfway through the night when she said something that stopped me cold. She leaned in closer, almost like she was telling a secret, and said she had to be honest about why she was really there. My stomach tightened immediately. She said she wasn't just dating, she was a reporter. I thought she meant a normal reporter, like someone who writes about politics or culture. But no, she explained that she ran this anonymous blog where she collected stories from men she considered problematic. She'd meet them, get their perspectives, and then write about them without names but with enough detail that her readers could judge. As she talked, my brain was spinning. I asked her what she meant by problematic. She said it varied. Sometimes it was guys who made sexist jokes. Sometimes it was ones who had cheated. Sometimes just men who fit a certain pattern she didn't like. And then she looked at me and said, "I think you fit for my next post." I froze. She said it so casually, like she was asking if I wanted dessert. My first instinct was to laugh, but her face stayed serious. She explained that she'd been noting down things from our conversation since day one. Things I thought were just casual chats. She'd been recording in her memory like data. She even pulled out her phone and scrolled to a document full of notes. Phrases I'd said, opinions I'd shared, little details I barely remembered mentioning. She said she wasn't going to use my name or photos, but she wanted to write about me as an example. According to her, I represented a type of man she wanted to highlight. She didn't say exactly what that type was, just that her readers would get it. My appetite vanished. I stared at her while she sipped her drink like nothing was wrong. I kept thinking back to the cafe, how comfortable I'd felt opening up. Now I realized she'd been mining me for material the entire time. Nothing had been genuine. It wasn't a date. It was research. I asked her if other guys knew they'd been written about. She shrugged and said most never found out. Some even messaged her blog anonymously without realizing they were talking to the same person. She smirked when she said that like it was clever. The band kept playing behind us, but I couldn't hear it anymore. All I could focus on was the idea that my words, my private conversations, were going to end up on some blog for strangers to dissect. I imagined people reading it, laughing, or worse, agreeing with her version of me. I wanted to call her out to tell her how messed up it was, but I felt trapped. The more I thought about it, the more I realized she probably wanted a reaction. If I got angry, she'd write about that too. If I defended myself, she'd spin it however she wanted. There was no way to win. I left the bar not long after. She didn't try to stop me. She just smiled and said, "You'll see it when it's up." I was supposed to be okay with that. That night, I went online and tried to find her blog. It wasn't hard. The posts were anonymous, but her style was obvious. Each story was about a different guy she'd gone out with. Some of them were clearly jerks, sure, but others just sounded like regular people caught in her net. She exaggerated little things, twisted comments, and framed everything to fit her narrative. The readers praised her, called her brave, said men like that deserved to be exposed. I scrolled through dozens of posts until my eyes hurt. I didn't see myself yet, but the way she looked at me told me it was only a matter of time. For weeks after, I checked back almost every day, dreading the moment my story would appear. Every time I saw a new post, my chest tightened. I imagined people reading about me, judging me through her lens. In the end, I don't even know if she ever posted about me. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But the damage was already done. She'd taken something as simple as dating and turned it into an investigation. She wasn't Amanda, the girl who liked coffee shops and photography. She was Amanda, the reporter who saw me as content. I wasn't expecting much the night I matched with Ibs. His profile wasn't over the top, just a few shots of him at bars with friends, one at a concert, and one where he was leaning against a car. Nothing fancy, but he had this confident grin in every picture that made him stand out. His bio said something like, newly single, figuring things out, looking for good company. I thought, fair enough, at least he's honest. We started talking and he was funny. Quick responses, a little sarcastic, but not in an annoying way. He said he had just gotten out of a long-term relationship and wanted to take things slow. That sounded reasonable. We messaged for a week or so, and he suggested grabbing drinks at a pub he liked. I agreed because, honestly, he seemed normal compared to half the people I'd been talking to. The pub was crowded when I got there, sticky floors, football on the screens, groups of friends yelling over music. He waved me over from a booth, and he looked like his pictures. Same grin, same confident posture. He ordered us beers, and we started talking. From the beginning, I noticed he was drinking fast. Like I was halfway through my first beer, and he was already finishing his second. I told myself maybe he was nervous. We joked around, swapped stories, and he kept ordering round after round. By the time I was on my second, he was starting his fifth. He didn't even slow down. At one point, I asked him about his breakup just out of curiosity. He laughed and said it was messy, that his ex didn't handle it well, but he was moving forward. Then he changed the subject quickly, asking me about travel, food, anything else. He didn't want to stay on that topic. By the end of the night, he was tipsy. Not falling over, but loud, slurring his words a little. He kept saying how nice it was to be out with someone new, how much he'd missed real connection. I helped him call a cab because I didn't think he was in shape to drive. He hugged me before leaving and said we should do it again. When I got home, I thought about how much he'd drunk. 5 beers in a couple hours isn't just casual drinking. Something about it stuck in my head, but I shrugged it off at first. A few days later, I was scrolling on social media when I stumbled across something that made my stomach drop. A friend of a friend had reposted engagement photos of a couple. The guy looked familiar. I zoomed in, and it was Ibs. Same grin, same posture, standing next to a woman in a white dress holding his hand. The caption said, 2 weeks until the big day. Can't wait to see these two tie the knot. I felt sick. I clicked through the woman's profile, and there it was. Dozens of pictures of her and Ibs. Vacations, family dinners, engagement party photos. She had posts about wedding planning, about her fiancé's incredible journey with sobriety, about how proud she was of him. One post even said, 2 years sober, and I couldn't be more grateful. My brain scrambled. 2 years sober. He drunk 5 beers right in front of me. Newly single. He was getting married in 2 weeks. Everything he'd said to me was a lie. I sat there staring at the screen, piecing it all together. He wasn't newly single. He was engaged. He wasn't sober. He was hiding his drinking. And I was just some random date he squeezed in before his wedding. The more I looked, the worse it got. His fiancée had tagged him in heartfelt posts about how strong he was, how he'd overcome struggles, how they were building a future together. Meanwhile, he was sitting across from me at a pub, downing beer after beer, laughing about how messy his breakup was. I didn't confront him. I didn't even message. What could I say? Hey, I saw your fiancé's post about your wedding. It wouldn't change anything. He'd just deny it or worse, blame me somehow. Instead, I blocked his number and deleted our messages. But I couldn't shake it. For days, I kept thinking about his fiancée. She looked so happy in those photos, so sure about the life they were building. She had no idea he was sneaking out, meeting strangers, drinking behind her back. I wanted to tell her, but I didn't know how. Would she even believe me? Or would it just cause chaos right before her wedding? What stuck with me most wasn't just the lies. It was how smooth he was about it. He didn't flinch when he told me he was newly single. He didn't hesitate ordering beer after beer, knowing full well his fiancée thought he was sober. He didn't slip up once. It made me wonder how many other women he'd pulled this with. The more I thought about it, the more it freaked me out. He wasn't just lying about being single. He was rewriting his whole life depending on who he was with. To me, he was a newly single guy trying to move on. To his fiancée, he was a devoted partner, sobered and ready to start a family. Those two versions of him couldn't have been further apart, yet he balanced them like it was nothing. That pub date keeps replaying in my head. The way he grinned, the way he leaned in, the way he acted like we were connecting. Meanwhile, he was just killing time before putting on a suit and saying vows. It's twisted, but I think part of him enjoyed the double life. Sometimes I wonder if his fiancée ever found out. If someone else tipped her off, or if she's still with him now, living under the same lies. I'll never know. All I know is that for one night, I was sitting across from a man who had 2 weeks left before walking down the aisle, and he was acting like he was free. And that's the part that keeps me up. Not the beers, not even the lies to me, but the fact that somewhere out there, someone thought they knew him better than anyone, and they had no idea who he really was. I met Brad at the gym, not online. That's probably why I trusted him at first. It felt different meeting someone face to face instead of through an app. I'd see him a couple times a week, usually in the weight area. He wasn't the loud type who slammed weights or grunted for attention. He kept it himself, always with headphones on, but every so often we'd nod at each other. Eventually, one day he asked if I wanted a spot, and we started talking after that. He was easy to talk to, the kind of guy who could make conversation about anything without it feeling forced. After a few casual chats, we swapped numbers. He mentioned he worked in counseling, specifically trauma therapy. That caught my attention because he had this calm, grounded way about him that fit the part. We started texting here and there, nothing heavy. Then one day he invited me to grab coffee after the gym. I figured, why not? At the cafe, he asked me about life, about stress, about stuff I didn't usually talk about with someone I barely knew. But the way he listened made me open up more than I expected. It didn't feel weird at the time. It felt good to get things off my chest. Over the next couple weeks, it became a pattern. We'd meet for coffee or go on long walks, and the conversations always shifted to personal stuff. He guided there, asking these probing questions in a way that didn't feel pushy. He'd nod, make thoughtful comments, and occasionally get advice that sounded professional. I started thinking of him less as a guy I met at the gym and more like someone who understood me. It was after one of those coffee meetups that things started to feel strange. We were sitting outside, and my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it, but then it rang again, and this time I picked up. A woman's voice came through the line, sharp and urgent. She asked if I knew who Brad was. I said yeah, and she immediately said I needed to be careful. I thought it was some prank at first, but she went on. She said Brad had a history of pretending to be a therapist when he wasn't licensed. She said he used it as a way to get close to women, make them open up, and then manipulate them. She said I wasn't the first person he'd done it to. Before I could even process what she was saying, she hung up. I sat there in shock, staring at Brad across the table. He noticed something was off and asked if everything was okay. I didn't say anything about the call, but suddenly, all the conversations we'd had replayed in my head differently. The way he guided me into telling him things I normally wouldn't share. The way he framed advice like it came from training when maybe it didn't. That night, I started digging. I searched his name online, looked through public records, anything I could find. Nothing came up about him being licensed. No LinkedIn profile that matched what he told me. Nothing about his so-called practice. It was like he didn't exist in the professional world at all. The next day, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from the same unknown number. It was a screenshot. A podcast page. The title of the episode made my stomach drop. How to break people down. The description said it was about tactics for making people reveal their deepest truths. I hit play, and my blood went cold. It was Brad's voice. He was laughing with another guy, bragging about how easy it was to get women to trust him by pretending to be a therapist. He described the process in detail, asking open-ended questions, making eye contact, validating their feelings. He said once you earn their trust, they'll tell you anything. He even boasted about how some women would cry in front of him after just 1 or 2 sessions. The way he said it was chilling, like he was proud of manipulating people. I listened for a few minutes, my hands shaking. He told stories that sounded uncomfortably familiar, like he was talking about me. He never used names, but the details were there. The gym, the coffee shop, the conversations about stress and relationships. I realized I was just one more story for his podcast. The next time we saw each other at the gym, I avoided him. He texted me later, asking why I'd been distant. I didn't respond. A couple days after that, another unknown number texted me. This time it was a different woman, saying she'd also fallen into Brad's sessions and later discovered she'd been mentioned on his podcast. She said a group of them were trying to warn others, which explained the call I'd gotten. I blocked his number after that, but he didn't stop. A week later, he messaged me from a different number, saying he thought we had a breakthrough together and that shutting him out wasn't healthy. That wording made my skin crawl. He was using therapy language as a weapon, twisting it to keep people hooked. After I ignored him again, I checked his podcast once more. A new episode was up. The description mentioned someone who couldn't handle the truth and ran away. I didn't click play. I didn't want to hear my life dissected like entertainment. Looking back, what gets me isn't just the lies, it's how convincing he was. He had the mannerisms down perfectly. The calm tone, the way he tilted his head, the phrases that sounded professional. If you didn't fact check, you'd believe him. I did, and I wasn't the only one. The scariest part is that he's probably still out there, doing the same thing to someone else. Meeting people in gyms, coffee shops, parks, pretending to help while really collecting their pain for content. To him, it's not about healing. It's about control and entertainment. And somewhere in his library of podcast episodes, there's probably one about me. The first time I met Claire was at a bookstore. Not on an app, not through friends, just one of those random chance encounters that don't really happen to me often. I was flipping through a stack of paperbacks, and she was standing in the same aisle a few feet away, holding a stack of books on marketing and psychology. She glanced over and made a small joke about how I looked lost, and we started talking. It wasn't forced either, it just flowed. She had this way of making conversation easy, like she'd known me longer than a few minutes. We stood there chatting about books for a while, and when I was about to leave, she said we should grab coffee sometime. I agreed. She handed me her number, written on the back of a receipt, and walked off like it was nothing. The whole thing felt almost too natural. A couple days later, we met at a small cafe. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with a notebook open. She smiled when she saw me and waved me over. We started talking, and it felt effortless again. She asked about my job, my family, things I like to do. She listened closely, nodding and smiling in a way that made me feel comfortable. By the end of that coffee, I felt I wanted to see her again. And we did. Once, twice, then more. Each time she picked the spot. Quiet cafes, parks, once even a museum. She always seemed interested in me, always asking questions that went a little deeper than normal dating stuff. Sometimes I wondered why she wanted to know certain things, but I didn't think much of it. It was maybe our 5th time hanging out when things took a turn. We were sitting on a bench in the park, and she looked more serious than usual. She closed the notebook she always carried with her and said she had something to tell me. My stomach sank, as those words usually mean something bad. She told me she wasn't who I thought she was. Not that her name wasn't Claire, and not that she lied about her age or anything like that. She said she was a university professor. At first, I didn't get why that was supposed to be shocking. But then she explained that she was running a study of deception about how people present themselves when they think they're getting to know someone. And I was part of it. I sat there in silence, trying to process. She said the way she met me, the way she asked questions, the way she carried that notebook, it was all part of her work. She said she was writing down how I responded, what I revealed, and how I acted when I thought I was on a date. The worst part was how calm she was about it. She wasn't apologizing, she wasn't nervous. She spoke like she was presenting findings at a lecture. She said most people never knew they were part of it, but with me, she decided to be upfront because she actually liked me. She said that somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like just research, and she wanted to be honest. I didn't even know how to react. My first thought was that everything I'd told her, everything I thought was building a connection, had been written down like data in her little notebook. I pictured her sitting in a classroom, showing her students the notes, breaking me down like a case study. I asked her if anyone else had seen what she wrote. She said no, that the notes were private for now, but eventually parts of it could end up in a paper. The way she said it made me feel small, like I was just one subject in a bigger project. I remember staring at her, wondering if any of the moments I thought were real had actually been real. The way she laughed at my jokes, The way she looked at me across the table, the way she seemed to listen. Was all of that part of her research, or was some of it genuine? She insisted she started liking me, but how was I supposed to tell the difference? After that day, things didn't feel the same. We still saw each other a couple more times, but every time she asked me something, I felt like it was a test. Every time she pulled out that notebook, even if it was just to scribble something random, I felt like she was studying me. I catch myself holding back, second-guessing what I said, wondering if I was just giving her more material. The last time I saw her, we were at another cafe and I couldn't take it anymore. I asked her point blank if I was just a subject or if she actually wanted to date me. She paused for a long time before saying she didn't know. That was all I needed to hear. I walked away from Claire that day, and we never talked again. Even now, I sometimes wonder how much of me ended up in her notes, in her research, maybe even in a paper somewhere. I wonder if students will one day read about me without knowing my name, just seeing me described as subject A, who answered this or acted that way. The thing that sticks with me most isn't even the lie itself. It's that she was so good at it. She knew exactly how to ask the right questions, how to make me feel comfortable, how to keep me talking. If she hadn't told me, I would have gone on believing it was real. And that's what messes with me, the idea that every smile, every nod, every bit of attention could have been nothing more than data collection. The whole thing with Vanessa started online like most of my disasters do. I wasn't really looking for anything serious at the time, just swiping here and there when I was bored. Her profile popped up and right away it felt too good to be true. I mean, her photos looked like something straight out of a magazine. That she was on a beach in a bikini, another in some elegant dress at a rooftop bar, and one more at a gym with perfect hair that somehow didn't look sweaty. Her bio said she was a Colombian model who had moved for work opportunities. Normally, I would have swiped left because when someone looks that perfect, you just assume they're fake. But I thought, screw it, I'll swipe right anyway. Somehow we match. I couldn't believe it. She messaged first too, which made me think maybe I'd been wrong. She said I had kind eyes, and that I looked like I'd be fun to talk to. We ended up messaging for a couple of days. She wasn't the greatest conversationalist. Her replies were kind of short and random, but she threw in enough flirty emojis that I ignored it. She told me her friends always compared her to Sofia Vergara, and honestly, looking at the pictures, I could kind of see it. Same glamorous vibe, same long hair, same smile. After a week of back and forth, we made plans to meet. She suggested a casual restaurant downtown, said she didn't want anything too flashy. That made me like her more. She could have chosen some expensive spot to keep up her model persona, but instead she went for normal. When the day came, I got there early and sat by the window. I kept checking the door every time it opened, expecting the woman from the photos to walk in and turn heads. 5 minutes passed. 10, then I noticed a woman rolling in through the door in a wheelchair. At first, I didn't even register it as her, but then she waved at me, smiling like we knew each other. It was Vanessa. And it was not the Vanessa from the pictures. She didn't look anything like the photos I've been staring at all week. Her hair was shorter, her face was rounder, and her body was completely different. On top of that, she had this strong body odor that hit me even from across the table. It wasn't just a little sweat smell either. It was bad, like she hadn't showered in days. I tried to keep my composure as she rolled up to the table and parked her chair beside me. She was cheerful, almost overly so, like she didn't notice the shock on my face. She leaned in and said, "You recognize me, right?" I forced a smile and nodded, even though my brain was screaming otherwise. We ordered food, but I could barely focus. The smell was overwhelming, and I kept trying to subtly lean away without making it obvious. She didn't seem to notice. Instead, she started talking about her modeling career, but the way she described it didn't add up. She said she mostly worked online and that she adjusted her photos depending on the project. Eventually, I asked her about her pictures. That's when she casually admitted that they weren't exactly real. She said she used an app to face swap her face onto Sofia Vergara's body, because people always say I look just like her anyway. She said it with so much confidence that I almost laughed. I wanted to ask which friends of hers were making those comparisons, because they clearly needed their eyes checked. She explained that she didn't see it as lying, just enhancing. She said it was hard for her to get matches otherwise, so she had to level the playing field. I sat there trying to wrap my head around it. She'd taken an entire celebrity's body and photoshopped her face onto it, then acted like that was normal. The rest of the meal dragged. She talked about how men usually ghost her when they find out, but she appreciated that I stayed. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and poked at my food. Every now and then, people at other tables would glance over, and I felt this weird mix of embarrassment and disbelief. When the check came, she didn't even pretend to reach for it. I paid just to get it over with, though I was annoyed at spending $42 on a meal I barely touched. As we left, she thanked me for meeting her and said she thought we had real chemistry. I mumbled something about being busy the next week and walked to my car as fast as I could. Later that night, she messaged me saying she had fun and wanted to see me again. I didn't reply. A couple days later, she double texted, saying she knew she wasn't what I expected, but that she deserved a chance. When I still didn't answer, she sent one last message. "You're just intimidated by a strong woman." I blocked her after that. Looking back, the wildest part isn't even that she catfished me. It's how confident she was in the lie. She didn't act guilty or embarrassed. She acted like I should have been impressed by her creativity. Like face swapping yourself onto Sofia Vergara is some sort of clever life hack. That night taught me something. Sometimes it's not the obvious fakes you need to worry about. It's the ones who really believe their own nonsense. I met Zaid online late one night when I couldn't sleep and was just swiping out of boredom. His profile didn't really scream anything special, but it had just enough to make me stop. A couple of moody pictures, one of him standing in front of some graffiti wall, another at a beach at sunset, and one selfie in a hoodie with messy hair. His bio said something vague about being adopted, working on finding his place in the world, and how he loved deep conversations. It wasn't flashy, but it felt kind of different from the usual "I love tacos" and Netflix bios. He messaged me first, saying he liked the band on my shirt in one of my pictures. From there, it flowed pretty easily. He wasn't like other guys who try too hard with pickup lines. He was more thoughtful, always asking about how I felt about stuff rather than just surface level questions. He told me he was adopted, that he always felt like an outsider in his family, and that dating was hard because not many people understood him. That part hit me because he talked about it in a way that felt raw, not polished. After a week or two of chatting, we decided to meet up. We picked a casual diner, nothing fancy. He walked in wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, and he looked like his photos. I actually thought he was cuter in person. He had this laid-back vibe, like he wasn't trying to impress anyone. At first, the date was normal. We ate, we talked, and he told me more about his adoption story. He said he didn't really keep in touch with his biological family, that he tried to reach out once, but it didn't go well. He told me he had a brother who he wasn't close with. The way he spoke made me think he carried a lot of heavy stuff, and I started to feel bad for him. But then little things started to feel off. For example, when I asked about what kind of work he did, he got vague. He said things like freelance projects or side hustles, but never gave me a straight answer. He quickly pivoted the conversation back to me, which at first I thought was sweet, but then I realized it was deflection. The weirdest part came later that night after the date. I was scrolling through social media and something popped up that made my stomach twist. I saw a photo of a girl I knew distantly from a friend's circle. She had just posted about her family, tagging her brother. When I clicked on his profile, my jaw dropped. It was Zaid. Same face, same hoodie, same vibe. Only this time the bio was totally different. It wasn't about being adopted. It was about his family, his roots, his siblings, and the girl who posted, she was his biological sister. Here's where it got disturbing. She looked a lot like me. Same hair color, similar facial features, even the same kind of style in photos. It was eerie. Suddenly, all the pieces started falling into place. Zaid hadn't just been drawn to me randomly. He had picked me because I looked like her. I kept scrolling through his sister's profile, and the more I looked, the more uncomfortable I felt. She had dozens of pictures of her life, birthdays, family trips, selfies, and I realized how many of them looked like ones I'd taken myself. It felt like he was drawn to me as a stand-in for her. The next time he messaged me, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I asked him directly if he had a sister. He got quiet for a while before replying, "Yeah, but we're not close." That was it. No details. I asked if she looked like me, and he dodged the question. That silence told me everything I needed to know. The more I thought about our conversations, the creepier it got. He told me about how he tried to reach out to his family and how complicated it was. Now, I wondered if he'd been lying about being adopted or twisting it somehow to make me feel sorry for him. He mentioned once that he felt drawn to certain types of people, and I laughed off, but now it sounded loaded. I couldn't shake the thought that maybe he'd used fake photos before, finding women who looked like his sister and creating profiles just to lure them in. The fact that I stumbled on her profile by chance made me wonder how many others hadn't. I stopped responding after that. He messaged me a few times, asking why I'd gone quiet, saying he felt like we had a connection. But all I could picture was him scrolling through his sister's photos and swiping until he found me because I looked enough like her. Weeks later, a friend mentioned she had seen his profile too, but under a different name. She said he'd matched with her, and his story was slightly different, but the tone was the same. Always deep, always emotional, always pulling people in with stories of loss or estrangement. That sealed it for me. He wasn't just confused, he was calculated. What unsettled me most wasn't even the lying about adoption or his family. It was the idea that I had been picked because I resembled someone else. That level of fixation is hard to forget. I keep wondering how many profiles he's running, how many women he's talked to under different names, all while chasing some image of his sister through other people. Every time I think back on that date, I remember the way he looked at me across the booth. At the time, I thought it was just interest, the way someone looks when they're really paying attention. Now I can't help but feel like he was studying me, comparing me to her in his head, checking boxes I didn't even know existed. That one night at the diner could have just been another first date for me. Instead, it turned into one of the creepiest realizations I've ever had. I met Megan on a random Tuesday night when I was scrolling with zero expectations. I'd already half decided I was going to delete the app because every conversation was the same. Then her profile popped up and I stopped. She had this kind of approachable vibe. Photos of her smiling in a farmer's market, sitting cross-legged in a park with a notebook, and one where she was holding a coffee cup in front of her face. Her bio said she was a therapist and that she loved good conversations with curious people. Compared to the dozen copy-paste bios I'd scrolled past, hers felt decent. She messaged me first, which already set her apart. Nothing fancy, just, hey, I like your dog because I had a picture of him in one of my photos. From there, it was easy. She was good at talking, not in a rehearsed way, but in a way that made you want to answer. She asked thoughtful questions, and she actually read what I wrote instead of glossing over it. After about a week, we made plans to meet. She suggested this small cafe with mismatched furniture, plants in every corner, and chopboards for menus. When I walked in, she was already there, waving at me from a corner table. She looked like her photos, which was a relief. The first half of the date was solid. We talked about work, family, movies, and random stuff. She told me she was doing private counseling sessions now after working in clinics for a while. The way she explained it sounded legit, like she knew what she was doing and cared about her clients. I believed her. But then things shifted. About an hour in, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me differently. Not in a flirty way, but in a serious way. She said she had to be honest about something. My first thought was that she was married or still hung up on an ex. What she actually said threw me. She told me she wasn't just a therapist, she also ran a YouTube channel. I didn't think that was a big deal until she explained what kind of channel it was. She said she uploaded case studies. Real conversations. Real people. She talked about men she'd gone on dates with and analyzed their behavior. She framed it like it was about toxic masculinity, like she was educating her viewers. And then she dropped the part that made my stomach twist. My date with her was being recorded. I looked around the cafe, my eyes darting to see where a camera could be. She smiled and tapped her tote bag under the table. She had a tiny recorder running the entire time. She told me not to worry because she didn't use real names, just patterns of behavior. I sat there stunned. Everything I'd just said, the stories about my job, my family, even my dumb joke about the crooked chair I was sitting on, was being collected as material. She wasn't on a date with me. She was studying me for her channel. I asked her straight out why she thought that was okay. She shrugged and said men rarely got called out on their patterns and that she was doing her part. She said her followers loved it when she broke down conversations and explained what men really meant. She said I had already given her plenty to work with. My appetite vanished. The coffee in front of me went cold as she kept talking about how her videos got traction, how some had thousands of views, and how people were finally learning thanks to her content. She described one episode where she read out a man's texts, pausing to explain each one like a lesson. The audience had praised her, saying it opened their eyes. All I could think about was being the next lesson. I told her I wasn't okay with it, and she just nodded, saying she'd respect my feelings, but the way she said it didn't sound convincing. It sounded like she was already framing my reaction for her video. After that, I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I left some cash on the table and said I had to go. She didn't stop me, just smiled like she knew more than I did. When I got home, I searched her online. It didn't take long to find her channel. The thumbnails were bright and catchy, with titles like Why Men Say This or Spotting Red Flags Early. Each video had her breaking down messages, dates, and conversations. She blurred faces, but the voices were there. Real people, real dates. I didn't see myself yet, but I couldn't shake the fear that was coming up in her next upload. I scrolled through the comments, and people were eating it up. They were thanking her, saying she was brave, saying her content was eye-opening. Not once did anyone question whether it was okay to use real people's lives this way. For days, I checked her channel obsessively, waiting for my face or my voice to show up. It never did, at least not while I was still looking, but the paranoia lingered. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be someone saying, "Hey, aren't you that guy in the video?" What stuck with me wasn't just that she lied about the date. It was how natural she was at it. She didn't stumble, didn't hesitate. She slid from casual conversation into therapist mode, into YouTuber mode like it was nothing. That told me she'd done it dozens of times before. I keep thinking back to her calm expression when she told me. No embarrassment, no apology, just confidence. To her, it wasn't wrong. It was content. And in her mind, I wasn't a person she'd just met. I was a case study, a character in her lesson plan for strangers online. That night at the cafe could have been just another first date. Instead, it became one of the strangest moments of my life. The way I met Adam wasn't through swiping, wasn't through a friend setting me up, nothing like that. It was at this rooftop bar I went to with coworkers one Friday after work. I wasn't planning to meet anyone. My plan was to grab a drink, laugh about dumb office stuff, and call it a night. Adam happened to be standing near our group, talking to some people I didn't know. At some point, we had eye contact, and he came over like it was the easiest thing in the world. He was smooth, not in a pushy way, but in that effortless kind of confidence some people just have. He had this clean look, good haircut, nice jacket, watch that looked expensive. He cracked a joke about how slow the bartender was, and just like that we were talking. We ended up separating from my group and grabbing our own corner table. He told me he was in sales, but not the boring kind, something international, he said, without giving too many specifics. I didn't really care about the job talk anyway. He carried himself like someone who had everything figured out, and after a couple drinks, I wasn't questioning much. By the end of the night, we exchanged numbers. He walked me out, gave me that half smile, and said he wanted to see me again. The texting after that was fast. He wasn't one of those people who disappear for a day or two. He was consistent, funny, flirty, and always seemed like he wanted to know more. Within a week, we had another date lined up. Dinner this time, just the two of us. That dinner was even better than the first time. He showed up in a fitted button-down, confident as ever. He asked about my family, about my goals, about the kind of future I pictured for myself. He was good at keeping the focus on me, but he shared enough about himself too. He said he grew up in a strict household, but he liked living his own life now. That line stuck with me, but I didn't think much of it. For a while, everything felt good. We saw each other more, we texted constantly, and he kept that cool, confident energy. I thought maybe I'd lucked out, maybe Adam was actually one of the rare good ones. Then the cracks started showing. One night, he invited me over to his place. It was clean, almost too clean, like a model home. He poured us drinks, and we sat on the couch listening to music. After a while, he started asking heavier questions, not just about my life, but about my views on faith, about how I felt about certain beliefs. At first, I thought it was just late night talk, the kind of stuff you end up in when you've had a couple drinks. But then he started pressing harder, almost like he was testing me. I brushed it off until the next week when he invited me out again. This time, instead of a bar or a restaurant, he asked me to meet him at this retreat center on the edge of town. He said it was a place he went sometimes to clear his head. I didn't know what to expect, but I trusted him enough to go. The moment I pulled up, something felt wrong. It wasn't a retreat center like I pictured. It was more like a camp, rows of cabins, a big hall in the middle, and banners with crosses hanging everywhere. The parking lot was full, and groups of people were walking around like they were heading to some event. Adam greeted me at the entrance, all smiles, acting like everything was normal. He led me inside one of the halls, and that's when I realized what was going on. The room was filled with chairs, all facing a stage. On the stage were speakers talking about purity, temptation, and finding the right path. The crowd clapped and nodded along. My stomach dropped. I turned to Adam, and he had this look on his face. Not embarrassed, not sheepish. Proud. That's when he told me the truth. He wasn't just some guy in sales. He was the son of a pastor, and he'd been involved in these retreats for years. He admitted that the whole confident, worldly vibe he gave off was just a mask. The real reason he dated was to bring people like me here. I felt frozen in my chair as he whispered about how much this place had helped him. He said too many people were lost and needed guidance. He said he believed in helping people find the truth through these camps. I realized then that this wasn't just a date anymore. He'd lured me into something I hadn't agreed to. I stood up and told him I was leaving. He tried to stop me, putting a hand on my arm and saying I should just give it a chance. He said he brought me there because he saw potential in me, because I was open-minded enough to be saved. Those words made my skin crawl. I pulled away and walked straight out. I didn't look back, didn't say goodbye. I got in my car and drove off, heart racing the whole way home. Later, I did some digging online. Sure enough, the retreat was part of a network of conversion-style camps. They targeted people through relationships, drawing them in with someone attractive and confident, and trying to fix them once they were hooked. And Adam? He was deep into it. His social media, which I hadn't paid much attention to before, was full of subtle hints. Church events, inspirational quotes, photos with his dad standing in front of a congregation. The realization hit me hard. The man I thought was this cool, confident guy living his own life was really someone running a playbook to recruit people. Everything from the way he dressed to the way he flirted was part of the act. I wasn't dating Adam, I was being tested by him. What gets me most when I think back is how good he was at it. He knew exactly how to pull me in, how to make me feel like I'd found someone genuine, only to flip it later. The fact that he wasn't embarrassed, he was proud. That's what makes it worse. I blocked his number that night and never looked back. But I'll never forget standing in that hall, surrounded by people clapping and cheering, realizing I was just another project for him. When Isabella and I first started talking, it felt like one of those matches that just clicks. Not the awkward small talk or the slow burn where you drag out conversations over weeks. From the first day, she had energy. She'd send long messages, funny low voice notes, random pictures of whatever she was doing. It felt like she actually wanted to talk instead of just passing time. Her profile was simple. She had a few selfies, one where she was holding a glass of wine on a balcony, another at a beach, and one with her dog. Her bio said she worked in design, loved traveling, and was always down for a good laugh. It didn't sound forced. It sounded like a normal person, which is exactly what I thought she was. For 2 weeks, we messaged constantly. She was flirty but not over the top. She'd ask questions, remember little details I told her, and tease me in a way that felt fun. By the time we decided to meet, I was honestly excited. We'd agreed on this cocktail bar that wasn't too far from where I live. It was the kind of place with dim lights, music just loud enough to make the atmosphere good, and a menu with drinks that had weird names you couldn't pronounce. When I walked in, she was already at a table, wearing a red dress and smiling when she saw me. I'll admit she looked amazing. The first half of the night was great. We ordered drinks, joked about how confusing the menu was, and shared some appetizers. She told me about her job, about how she wanted to travel more, about the places she'd already been. I was sitting there thinking this was one of the better first dates I'd had in a long time. But then things got strange. Halfway through her second drink, she leaned in close and said she had to be honest with me about something. My mind went to the usual. Maybe she wasn't really single, maybe she had kids she hadn't mentioned, something like that. What she actually said caught me completely off guard. She told me she wasn't there for herself. She said she was there on behalf of her cousin. At first, I didn't get it. She smiled, took another sip of her drink, and explained. Her cousin was in a relationship and had been suspicious about her boyfriend. Apparently, she thought he might be cheating. So Isabella said her cousin asked her to set up loyalty tests. Basically, she'd go on dates with guys her cousin's boyfriend knew and then report back if anything happened. I sat there blinking at her, trying to process what she just told me. I asked her what that had to do with me, and that's when she said the thing that made my stomach turn. The whole date was being live-streamed to a group chat. Her cousin and a bunch of their friends were watching us in real time. I froze. She said it so casually, like it wasn't insane. She pointed at her purse, said her phone was angled perfectly so the camera could see us. She even laughed, saying the chat was already lighting up with comments about me. I didn't know what to do. Everything suddenly felt fake. The way she smiled at me, the questions she asked, even the way she leaned in close. All of it was for an audience. People I didn't know were sitting behind their screens, watching me eat chicken skewers and sip on a drink, judging me like I was on some kind of reality show. I asked her if she was serious, and she nodded, grinning like it was no big deal. She said I was doing great so far, like I was being graded. She added that if I passed, her cousin would feel better about her relationship. The rest of the night felt like a blur. I kept glancing at her purse, knowing my face was probably being streamed straight into some group chat. Every word I said, every gesture, every laugh, it wasn't just between me and her. It was content for a bunch of strangers. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I told her I wasn't comfortable being part of some loyalty game. She shrugged, said she understood, and then pulled out her phone. Sure enough, she showed me a chat window. At least 10 people were in it, typing comments about me. Things like, "He seems nice," and "Look how nervous he is." My hands actually went cold seeing it. I stood up, said I was leaving, and walked out. She didn't chase me. She didn't apologize. She just stayed there with her phone, probably updating the group on my reaction. When I got home, I kept replaying everything in my head. The flirty texts, the way she laughed at my jokes, how she seemed genuinely interested in me. All of it was scripted for her cousin's little test. I wasn't a date. I was an experiment. A couple days later, she texted me saying I shouldn't take it personally, that I was just part of the process. She even sent a laughing emoji. I didn't reply. I blocked her after that. What gets me the most is how normal she acted at the start. If she hadn't told me, I might never have known. I could have gone the whole night thinking I'd had a genuine date, when really I was entertainment for a group of strangers sitting behind their phones, sipping drinks in their living rooms, laughing at me like I was a character in their show. That night taught me something I didn't want to know. Sometimes, even when it feels real, you might just be part of someone else's game. Meeting Nate didn't happen in some random way. It was through one of those dating apps I swore I was going to delete about 10 times before. His profile stood out, not because he was overly good looking, but because he had this long bio full of buzzwords. Stuff like feminist ally, progressive thinker, committed to emotional growth. Most guys' bios are just jokes or one-liners, so I thought maybe this was better. He had a few artsy photos too, like him sitting in a coffee shop with a book, one on a hiking trail, and another at what looked like some kind of protest. When we matched, his first message wasn't flirty or cheesy. It was a paragraph. He asked me what I thought about the book in my profile picture. He told me about one he was reading and how it challenged his perspective. Normally, long messages make me roll my eyes, but this one seemed thoughtful. For about a week, we messaged nonstop. He was very focused on big conversations: politics, gender roles, society. It felt more like a debate forum sometimes than a dating app, but I figured maybe meeting in person would balance things out. We set a date at this vegan cafe he recommended. When I walked in, he was already at a table with his laptop open, papers spread out like he'd been working on something important. He stood up, smiled, and hugged me. He looked like his pictures, maybe a little scruffier, but still the same guy. We ordered food, and at first the conversation wasn't bad. He was intense, sure, but he kept eye contact and seemed passionate about what he believed in. He told me about his activism, about how he supported women's causes, and how he considered himself different from the typical guy. Then the vibe shifted. After about 30 minutes, he pulled out a folder from his bag and slid it across the table to me. I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke, but he looked serious. I opened it, and inside was an actual document, like pages stapled together with headings and bullet points. At the top, it said, non-exclusive emotional labor agreement. I blinked, thinking I must have misread it, but nope, that's exactly what it said. He explained that he used contracts in his relationships. According to him, it set clear boundaries and expectations. The one he gave me basically outlined what he expected if we started dating. Things like how much time I should dedicate to emotional check-ins with him, how to navigate disagreements, and a section about shared labor in romantic settings. It didn't stop there. He pointed out one clause that said he had multiple partners already, 5 to be exact, and that they'd all signed similar contracts. The way he said it, you'd think it was the most normal thing in the world. He even said it was empowering because it kept everything transparent. I sat there trying to decide if he was joking or if this was his real deal. The way he calmly went through the contract, page by page, made it clear this wasn't some prank. He actually lived like this. He asked me to sign it, right there, on a first date. I pushed the folder back and told him it wasn't for me. He nodded like he expected that reaction, then launched into this speech about how traditional dating was outdated, how people should be upfront about their needs, and how his system was the future. I looked around the cafe, half expecting someone to come over and say I was being filmed for some kind of hidden camera show. But no, this was real. The rest of the date dragged. He kept circling back to the contract, trying to convince me it was progressive, that it protected me too, that I should feel honored he included me. I couldn't even focus on the food anymore. All I wanted was to get out of there. When I finally stood up and said I had to leave, he didn't seem upset. He just smiled and said he'd keep me on file in case I changed my mind. On file, like I was some potential employee instead of a person he'd just met. Later that night, I told a friend about it, and she laughed so hard she cried. She said it sounded like some satire skit, not a real date. But I kept replaying it in my head, realizing how serious he was. He wasn't trying to be funny. This was his actual approach to dating. Contracts, clauses, multiple partners, all treated like a system. I ended up blocking him the next day. But for weeks, I wondered how many other women had sat across from him, staring at that same document, trying to process what was happening. I wondered if any of them actually signed it. The whole thing didn't just weird me out. It made me think about how much effort he must put into this. He had the contracts typed, printed, stapled. He carried them around like a business proposal. It wasn't impulsive. It was his lifestyle. That date wasn't just awkward. It was one of the strangest experiences I've ever had. Sitting in a cafe, sipping a smoothie, being asked to sign a multi-page contract outlining how to handle emotional labor. And the wildest part, the way he said it, I really think he believed he was ahead of the curve. I wasn't even in the mood to meet anyone when I started talking to Nafisa. It was one of those weeks where everything felt like too much, and I only opened the app out of boredom while sitting on my couch. Her profile popped up, and it caught me right away. She had this calm smile in every picture. Nothing flashy, just her sitting at a cafe, walking through a park, and one photo of her in a denim jacket leaning against a railing by the water. Her bio was short, looking for something real, tired of games. That last part made me laugh because it's exactly what half the people on those apps claim, but something about her seemed genuine. She messaged first, which threw me off. Just a simple, "Hey, you seem interesting." It wasn't much, but it opened the door. We started talking, and she had this easy rhythm to the way she texted. Not too short, not too long. She'd ask things about my day, share stories about her own, even send me songs she liked. It felt light and fun, the kind of energy you actually want after swiping through people who either ghost or get weird fast. After about a week, she suggested we meet up. She picked this little taco spot downtown that had string lights and outdoor seating. When I got there, she was already at a table waiting like she'd been waiting just for me. She looked like her photos, same smile, same laid-back vibe. We ordered food, and the conversation flowed just as easily in person as it had over text. The first date went so well that we immediately made plans for a second, and then a third. By the third date, I really thought things were clicking. She laughed at my dumb jokes, remembered small details I told her, and seemed genuinely interested in me. But then, after that third date, everything flipped. I got a text late at night, but it wasn't from her, it was from her number. When I opened it, The message was long and started with "This is Nafis's boyfriend." My stomach dropped. I kept reading, and the rest of the text didn't make it any better. He wrote that she wasn't really single, that they'd been together for years, and that she had this thing she did as payback because of how she'd been cheated on in the past. According to him, she would go online, make profiles, and catfish guys into thinking she was single. Then she'd go on actual dates, charm them, and later reveal to him what happened like it was some kind of game between them. He said she dared herself to keep it going to see how many men she could fool, and that it gave her control back after what she'd gone through. He told me not to bother contacting her again because she never cared about me. It was all just part of their twisted routine. I didn't reply. I just sat there staring at the message, trying to piece together everything that had just unraveled. The more I thought about it, the more things started to click. Little moments during our dates where she'd look at her phone and smirk. Times when she'd ask oddly specific questions, like whether I'd ever cheated on someone or what I thought about trust. Back then, I thought she was just being thoughtful. Now it felt like she was gathering material for the story she'd tell her boyfriend later. I tried to convince myself maybe the text was fake, maybe it was some jealous guy messing with me. But the more I replay everything, the harder it was to deny. The way she carried herself, the way she always seemed a little too amused by the whole process, it made sense now. I didn't hear from her after that. No apology, no explanation, nothing. It was like she disappeared the second her boyfriend stepped in to send that message. For weeks after, I couldn't shake the weirdness of it. I kept imagining them sitting together, laughing about me like I was some punchline to their inside joke. Every detail I thought was genuine. The song she sent me and the way she looked at me across the table, even the way she smiled when I told her a story, was probably just part of their little dare. The thing that got under my skin most was how convincing she was. She didn't act distant or suspicious. She played the part perfectly. If it hadn't been for that text, I probably would have kept seeing her, thinking I'd finally found someone who actually cared. Even now, I still don't know how many guys she's done this to. Dozens, maybe. Each one probably walking away with the same realization I had, that they were never more than a piece of some revenge game she and her boyfriend thought was entertaining. I blocked her number after that, even though she never tried to reach out again. But every once in a while, I'll catch myself thinking back to those nights with her, wondering how much of it was real and how much was just performance. And the truth is, I'll probably never know. What I do know is that for her, I wasn't a person she wanted to know. I was just another dare to cross off her list.